Welcome to Next Generation Today. I'm John Phillips. Joining me on set is our old friend, and by that I don't mean he's long in the tooth, I mean longtime companion to Tammy,
yes.
Stephen Kruiser, and host of the Tammy Bruce Show, which you can get online at tammybruce.com. Tammy Bruce. On today's show, we'll be talking about the new disturbing stats related to ObamaCare.
Something's
Plus,
disturbing?
Well, there's a lot
shocked.
that's disturbing, but we'll talk about the latest disturbing stats.
Yes.
Plus, if you're thinking about driving after having a glass of wine, especially if it's out of a box that you got from the vintage cellars of the AM/PM, think again. We'll have that story for you. Plus, later on, we'll connect with our pal Alan West, who's in Washington, D.C., and wearing a necktie. But first, here's my top story. Julian Bond, former NAACP chairman, had this to say about the IRS hassling Tea Party groups. Let's watch.
I think it's entirely legitimate to look at the Tea Party. I mean, here are a group of people who are admittedly racist, who are overtly political, who tried as best they can to harm President Obama in every way they can. They are the Taliban wing of American politics, and we all ought to be a little worried about them.
I want to be whatever he's on.
This is like Fringe, and he's in the alternate universe with the blimps in the sky. It's like, what? It's a shame. It's heartbreaking because you could have a senior statesman like that who we could all trust, or you could have just laughter, which is what broke out here.
Well, I want to blow
Shocking.
something out of the water that I've been hearing a lot of lately.
Okay.
I mean, I hear this on liberal talk radio, and I hear this on MSNBC. Well, during the George W. Bush years, the NAACP got audited by the IRS. Well, here's the difference between what we're saying now and what happened with the NAACP. What happened with the NAACP was Julian Bond, who we just heard from, said something that sparked an investigation. The investigation was sparked by a specific act by the president of the NAACP. What we're seeing right now in the Obama administration and what from the IRS towards the Tea Party groups is they're just randomly going after them because they have names like Tea Party or Patriot or Debt in the title. Those are two completely different things.
I mean, we want the IRS to be able to investigate situations that seem to require investigation. I mean, this is one of the things. We don't want fraud. We want things to happen correctly. In this instance, we now know that for an 18-month period of time, 100% of the groups that had Tea Party in their name were reviewed. I mean, this is harassment. It is the ultimate sign of tyranny, which is use government power to squelch free speech.
And it's not just an audit. They can say audit if they want, but they're doing some really ridiculous things like, they're going after the pertinent people in each of these organizations and saying, give us the names of the people in your family, too.
And your private thoughts. What have you been thinking about?
Show us screenshots of any time your organization has been mentioned on Facebook. This has been happening.
Insane.
It really is just trying to run them out of business.
Yeah.
It's not an audit. It's not a review of anything.
And it's going one way, too, because the Daily Caller found out that Barack Obama's half-brother, who lives in Kenya and ran for
Malik,
the
also
president.
known as Roy. I like that. Malik Roy Obama.
We'll call him Roy for these purposes.
This is like Billy, who was the Jimmy Carter brother?
Roger Clinton.
No, Roger Clinton, and then who was?
Oh, Roger Clinton was
Roger
the best,
Clinton, and then Carter's brother was weird.
Billy Bean.
Look, everybody's
Billy
got a
Bean.
Malik in their family.
Yeah, I just wish Malik had a mullet. But anyway, so Roy has a foundation called the Barack H. Obama Foundation that apparently has a lot of problems. And among other things, it's built a madrasa. And
They say. We're not sure even.
It's building a home for an imam.
Yeah, it's all Islamic work, but we really can't prove it.
And it was fast-tracked by the IRS. And this
month.
organization has problems as long as my arm. Yet Tea Party groups, sometimes it took them 3 years to get all the paperwork
And some
to
gave
check
up.
out.
Some gave up.
Oh, yeah, many gave up.
It's appalling at how overt they are with the politics.
Woman, this Lois Lerner, who is the one who did the apology and announced that they had been doing bad things, is the one who fast-tracked Malik Obama's, he's the half-brother of Barack Obama, his application for that foundation. She signed it. It was within 30 days. He had been operating for, I think, a few years, getting tax-deductible donations without having the status. That, if you do it over a period of time, is also a criminal act. They then gave him retroactive tax deductibility so that it erased any criminal activity that was going on. I mean, really, I might change my name to Roy Obama, and maybe we should have all have done that. The second, the third, the fourth.
The singing Roys.
Yes,
like George Foreman did with his son.
That's right.
George the first, fifth,
George,
sixth. We'll all just be Roys.
Yeah. Welcome to the next
generation. A nation of Roys. Be strong.
With Malik, and Malik.
I met a couple of women in Texas this week, and one was heading up a 9/12 group, and one was heading up a Tea Party group, and they were detailing everything that they'd been put through to do this, and there were a couple of organizations that came in and decided to help them. That was the only reason that they didn't bail, because they were both at I'm done, I give up.
Right.
Because that's what they're trying to do. It's like an insurance company tries to break your spirit sometimes with things. That's what they're trying to do, is break their spirits.
At a minimum, what you have here is you have a man who is so far in over his head that he has absolutely no control over his own organization. The IRS, which he's trying to say, oh, that's an independent organization, I have nothing to do with them. No, I'm sorry, it's in the executive branch.
Yes.
As is the Justice Department that was subpoenaing all the telephone records of the Associated Press reporters, as is the Health and Human Services Department, which was soliciting political campaign donations to try to push ObamaCare.
Would this even be possible, though? And David Axelrod, in trying to cover for Obama, said today that the government is so vast, it's impossible for the president to know these things. Maybe it is about the size of government. And frankly, with this kind of size of government, I think no matter what party you're from, it's going to invite people who feel this way about government, and that it does take on a life of its own. And I think that's the danger, that it happens to be Barack Obama in office. We see that the Republicans have facilitated this by doing nothing for years, as have the press. So our larger issue, while Obama is a symbol of it, is the larger big government dynamic with no real leadership in Washington.
But that's where the narrative should go on our side, too. That's what you just said is what we need to key in on. You're right. When government gets big, it gets like this. If this president...
And it attracts people like this.
If this president and his imagined vaunted intellect, which I've been hearing about all these years but have not yet seen make a public appearance, but if he can't follow things, it has gotten out of hand. I mean, they're all across the board today, pretty much everyone's excused. The Holder was speaking at the same time Carney was speaking, and it was all, we don't know anything. We just don't know anything. They were admitting being dumb and not being able to keep tabs on anything.
All right, before we move on to the next one, who's the biggest name that's going to have to resign as a result of the scandal?
I think, even though it should have happened with the death of people in Fast and Furious, I think finally Eric Holder might be held accountable for something.
They'll have somebody at the IRS fall on the sword and Holder will skate.
I think you're right. I think Holder is not going to survive this.
I hope that's right. I'm afraid I'm right.
I think Jay Carney might be done, too, because he's been so bad throughout all of this.
I think he'll want to spend more time with his family.
He was babbling about...
That's only if you say something racist.
He got so far afield today, he started babbling about spending more on education and infrastructure while they were... Seriously, while they were discussing
Does anyone
this.
see, is there a key in his back? Is somebody turning a key?
All right, we'll have more on this later on in the program with Alan West, but right now, it's Tammy's turn.
Well, thank you, Johnny. Pleasure to be here. My top story involves a man in New York. His name is Gregory Dean. He was recently charged with violating the New York SAFE Act. What was his crime? Having 9 bullets in his gun, 2 more than the 7 legally allowed. Welcome to the new America. This man was driving. It is a legally owned pistol, legally possessed. He was pulled over because his license plate light was out. They noticed he had the firearm. It was visible. And he was arrested for having 2 too many bullets. Now, I've stated when this first happened, when Cuomo put this forward, this wasn't going to make anybody safer. It was going to criminalize law-abiding citizens. It was also going to be a revenue maker as well, because then you've got bail and you've got tickets, you've got fines and everything else. But this is where we're at now. You've got a legal, law-abiding man being arrested simply because he had 2 more bullets in his gun, and it certainly was not a danger to society. This is what New York has set up, and I think it is a prelude and a test for having this unfold in the rest of the country.
Well, it's interesting that you're bringing this story up today, because today is also the same day that we're learning about the history of the shooter in New Orleans over Mother's Day. This is a guy who should have been in jail but was let out. He was brought in for a gun charge, and he was let out because the bail was set so abnormally low by the judge that he was able to be out on the street and shoot up this crowd of people. I think at this point we know that it's the same jerks that are breaking all of the laws that are the ones that we have to be afraid of, not the law-abiding people who are just doing nothing but having a light go out. But no, we let that guy out so he can shoot everyone at a Mother's Day parade, but this guy is in trouble.
The criminalization of people who were just a month or two ago law-abiding citizens is the scariest thing about this to me now. It's absolutely terrifying. And if you say anything like that when this kind of legislation is being proposed, you're called a nut. You know?
And you're going to get audited.
You're going to get audited, and you're paranoid, and you're everything else. But this guy now, because of 2 bullets, they're parsing it that badly now. He is now going to have some kind of record, whether it be a misdemeanor, I don't know whether it's a misdemeanor or a felony there, but. And it's the euphemistic names they give the law to. You alluded to in the beginning, the SAFE Act.
The SAFE Act.
I would like to point out that you can kill someone with 7 bullets, just like you can kill them with 9 bullets. It's not that hasn't done anything.
And you're right. Now the guy has a record, and I bet you there's going to be a new law that if you've ever been arrested on a gun crime, you won't be able to get another one, or it'll be taken from you.
Yep. And
that's the next step.
And then they're going to start revising the number of rounds you can have down too. It's going to go from 7 to 5 to this to that, and soon to squeeze, 1. And then we got to get your gun. Yeah. That's how it goes. The only logical conclusion is they're going to come get the gun sooner or later.
That's right.
All right, Stephen.
Remember when President Obama said his health care plan would only cost remember when remember when $1 billion was a big deal, but now would only cost $900 billion over 10 years? Yeah, try double that. The CBO released a report this week saying it's going to double that in the first 10 years, the first decade. And this is something I've been harping on for the longest time. On the big federal programs, the projections are always wrong. Never sometimes. You look historic, they are always wrong. They're always wrong by a lot. And this one now, and so I'm not saying just the government's projections are wrong. These CBO numbers will end up being low too. I bet they're
they never make a mistake of overestimating how much something will cost, do they?
No,
it's always under. It's amazing how that works.
But I want to go. Tammy and I talked about this earlier. I want to throw this at you, John. I think right now, everything else is a smokescreen to keep people's eyes off the ball when it comes to the nightmarish implementation of Obamacare. I think I was not a conspiracy theorist before. They've turned me into one. Yes, he is a transformative president, finally, okay?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, as big as these scandals are, and the IRS scandal's huge, Benghazi's huge, what's going on with the AP phone records is huge. Yeah. But the biggest problem they have is certainly going to be Obamacare, because that's a kitchen table issue for a lot of people. You have people who are political animals like the three of us and Alan and people that are watching this program, but most people aren't like that. Most people just want to go about their day-to-day business, and they don't pay attention to politics, and the government is in Washington DC and they live in Los Angeles or they live in Kansas, and it's just far removed from them, and it's just something they don't think about. But when you go to the doctor and everything that you knew has changed, and things that you're used to seeing and things that you're used to getting suddenly don't exist, and suddenly your costs are skyrocketing, and you're looking at the bills and you're looking at what you're seeing from your doctor, and you're thinking, wait a minute, what went wrong here? Oh, wait, Obamacare.
And there's one projection now saying that the health insurance is going to go up 100 to 400%. All of this hits toward the end of the year. And these are the things, and my worry is for the young people watching this, because they're not going to necessarily get into Obamacare, which is one of the major problems, is that young people won't necessarily notice what has happened unless their parents tell them and share with them the nightmare that is occurring. And young people, obviously, from 30 and under. So that's one of my concerns, is they're going to stay away, and they might not know that this is hitting the fan.
Well, the parents are going to have to move into the basements that the young people moved into to be with their parents, because they didn't have it.
Well,
it'll be just everybody in the basement.
Everyone will be in the basement. There we go.
Well, look, I mean, this is something that they're not going to be able to escape from. And I also believe it's why a lot of senior Democrats are retiring. I believe it's why Max Baucus in Montana is taking up
talk about running for the hills.
Rockefeller in West Virginia, they're all Harkin in Iowa. None of them want to run for re-election, and I believe it's because of Obamacare.
And you know, Baucus is going to be chairing this IRS hearing.
Yeah.
And he said a couple years ago he wanted the IRS to do special scrutiny of Tea Party groups in particular, and now he's the one heading up the investigative committee in the Senate on the IRS for doing exactly what he wanted 2 years ago. I mean, this is outrageous, and that's who's heading it up.
And the only reason I'm not as cynical about the administration taking heat for this, as I have been in the past. It's like you look at Medicare alone. The projections on Medicare over time have just been awful. But they're always done so far after the fact that it doesn't bug people as much. This stuff's going to start hitting people right away.
Great point.
People aren't going to be able to dodge this.
Yeah.
All right, and speaking of Washington, D.C., let's go ahead and shift gears and head over to the nation's capital right now and check in with our pal Alan West. Alan, what's going on in the nation's capital?
Well, I tell you what, it is busy. It has certainly become the city of a lot of corruption, the district of corruption. But it's good to be with you, John, and Tammy and Steve, and all is going well. But what I want to talk to you about today is something that we have here in Washington, D.C. It's called the Pinocchio check, and it's done in the Washington Post. And Glenn Kessler gave a Pinocchio check on the president. As you recall, back on the 13th of May this week, the president said at that news conference that he held with David Cameron, the day after it happened, I acknowledged that this was an act of terrorism. Well, they went back and kind of did a little check on the president, and it seems that on September the 12th, he said no acts of terror will shake the resolve of this great nation. On September the 13th, at the campaign event in Las Vegas, he said no act of terror will dim the light of the values that we proudly shine upon. And then in Golden, Colorado, on September the 13th, at another campaign event that lets you know what was important after Benghazi, he said no act of terror will go unpunished. Well, Mr. Kessler went back and looked at 3 different occasions after the Benghazi attack where the president dodged the question about calling it an act of terrorism. He did it on a 60 Minutes interview where, in response to Steve Croft, he said, it's too early to know exactly how this came about. 8 days later on Univision, he referred to what we do know is that the natural protests that arose because of the outrage over the video were used as an excuse by extremists to see if they could do direct harm against U.S. interests. And then the last time was again on The View on September the 25th when he was asked again. Hillary Clinton has said it was an act of terrorism. President Obama said, we're still doing an investigation. So Glenn Kessler gave the president 4 Pinocchios. The highest you can get is 5. I don't think it's a good thing for the president of the United States to get 4 Pinocchios the day after he just gave a joint press conference with the Prime Minister of Britain. So that is pretty big news here. Once again, it lends to that aspect of, can you really trust this administration? Can you really trust this president? It comes back to what Steve was just talking about. Back in 2010, they said that the health care law was only going to be $940 billion. Now we're close to $1.8 trillion. So I'll throw it back to you guys so we can have a little discussion.
Well, Alan, that leads me to my next question, which is looking a little bit into the future here. We know we can't trust him and his administration based on what they've said about Benghazi. We know we've been lied to there. We know we've been lied to by the IRS. They were asked point blank if they were targeting Tea Party organizations, the IRS commissioner, and he said no. We know they lied there. We know that they haven't been shooting straight with us on the AP phone numbers that they've taken. We've got a pattern now where this administration is not telling us the truth, and we know we can't trust them.
And don't forget Fast and Furious.
And Fast and Furious, of course.
God.
What does this mean for amnesty? Because right now there's a huge discrepancy over how many people would get amnesty under the immigration bill. There's a huge discrepancy over how much it would cost. Do you think these stories kill amnesty?
Well, what we have to be very careful of, we did an interview up in the Capitol yesterday, and I took the time to stop off in the Senate chamber where they're debating amendments on the immigration law. They're going to continue on, and probably you can look for them to have a vote in the committee on this immigration bill pretty soon, maybe before even Saturday. So I think that under the radar screen, they're going to try to work this through in the Senate and then get it sent over to the House. But I'm telling you, the administration has no credibility right now whatsoever.
Also, Alan, what's interesting to me is that when they're talking about perhaps using all of this with the IRS to reverse the Citizens United decision, whereas in fact the IRS is supposed to be the enforcer of collections and the application for Obamacare. It doesn't seem like anyone has mentioned their concern with what is clearly a deepening scandal of corruption and probably some criminal acts, how this would affect the IRS suddenly getting even more deeply into people's lives through their health care. Can this be an argument against Obamacare being implemented until we deal with the IRS?
Well, Tammy, that's a great point. They are talking about that up here in Washington, D.C.
Great.
As a matter of fact, they're going to hold the hearings on Friday, and that's one of the points that they're going to be bringing out is, do we really want to see the IRS go ahead and be in charge? Because you're talking about, a couple of few thousands new IRS agents being hired, and they're talking about putting a hold on that.
And this is, I can just imagine on Twitter there's a joke going around of Dr. Obama deciding who's going to get a transplant and who isn't, and then Nurse Hillary asks, what difference does it make? I mean, do we really want these? I can imagine, if you're a conservative, no transplants for you.
Alan, I've got a question here.
Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
I was wondering, it's been a cascade of bad news for the administration in the last several days. It has not been any other administration would probably be buckling under its own weight already. And the people on our side, we've been saying, finally, this is finally going to be the thing that they have to feel finally. But as John said earlier, not everybody else in America is paying attention as much as we are. Do you think that this last week and a half specifically has been serious enough that the administration is feeling the heat finally, that the president and the attorney general specifically, do you think they're actually feeling it this time?
Yeah, I think that they are feeling it, but, when you start to get people from ABC, CBS, even Chuck Todd over on NBC came out and, challenged them to release emails. You saw the White House press conference today, but we also have to understand, you guys talked about Julian Bond being on MSNBC, and there is still this belief that, the Tea Party deserved exactly what they got. And then you have this quote from Nancy Pelosi where she said, the whole idea of a 501c4 being engaged in politics is something we've got to put in a spotlight, and maybe this is that opportunity.
Wow.
So, using the old Rahm Emanuel case of, let every crisis turn to your advantage, this is exactly what they're trying to do, to look and see, this is not about, the IRS going after the Tea Parties. We don't need this 501c4 thing out there, so let's overturn that. So you got to understand, you're dealing with the Alinsky'ites, you're dealing with people that are very good messengers and they know how to spin things. That's why we have to have a unified voice on our side to get this out across all aspects of the media.
All right. Well, let's move on to Fast Facts, and Alan, we'll start with you.
Yeah, staying on the healthcare theme, the National Federation for Independent Businesses just updated their small business report. This is based upon the impact of the health insurance tax that's part of the Affordable Care Act. And what they're looking at is anywhere from 146,000 to 262,000 jobs to be lost by 2022 because of this health insurance tax. So again, we're talking about the credibility of the administration. We're talking about the truth getting out. But we've got to make sure we keep the pressure on. Now, this week, I believe tomorrow, there will be another repeal vote on the Affordable Care Act. Of course, that will die in the Senate, but we've got to continue to bring attention to this.
Well, there will at least be one new job posted in the United States. I saw a listing on Craigslist for an attorney general in Washington. So I don't know what's going to happen with that.
The creator of one job.
And there also should be a commissioner for the IRS. That should be a job position coming up.
Another job position. Gee, maybe we should all move to Washington.
All right, Tammy, it's your turn.
All right. Well, my fast fact is 0.05. That's the new blood alcohol content that the feds want to enforce. That's 35% lower than the current 0.08, which is currently allowed in most states. This is, as you alluded to in the beginning, Johnny, this means a woman who has one glass of wine, she'll be in trouble. But it also attaches to what my top story was, which this is another opportunity to make Americans criminals. You can pull pretty much anybody over after the dinner hour if you've had one beer or one glass of wine, and you are going to then pay a fine. It's another revenue opportunity, and then you will be in the records of having committed a crime, and certainly of driving under the influence. Those things make health insurance costs go up. They make car insurance costs go up. Even the Mothers Against Drunk Driving in Massachusetts is against this, saying this is not going to change anything on the road, and we should put our energy into things more seriously.
And if you get one of these, to my understanding, it costs you north of $10,000.
Yeah, this is a scam, at the level of every other scam we're seeing with big government now. They're looking for funding, and they're looking to send messages that you need to be controlled because the average citizen doesn't know how to handle their lives. That is a crime, and we've got to reject this.
Always look for something that benefits the attorneys and the insurance industries, because they're the rats behind most things like this. And I'm Polish and Irish. I wake up after a night when I didn't drink with that much in my blood.
See, there you go. I mean, this is horrible for the Scottish and the Irish and the Italians.
We're not born with a blood type. We're born with a blood alcohol
There you
content.
go.
All right, Stephen.
On this day in 1973, May 15th, the great Nolan Ryan pitched the first of his 7 no-hitters. I believe it was 7 no-hitters that Ryan pitched. And what I love about Ryan, not just because he's a friend of the Bushes and we think he's on our side and everything.
And he's Irish.
And he's Irish. Every time I saw an interview with him about why he was so good, why he lasted longer and everything, he said what every elite athlete, not just every elite athlete, but every elite athlete who then took advantage of all his gifts said. He practiced harder. He practiced harder and prepared more. There was never any mystery with the guys who became great. It was always just talking about hard work. And that's what I like.
Whether it be him or Babe Ruth, guys that have normal bodies that look like your next door neighbor managing to do this.
Well, and Babe Ruth, all these guys are hitting home runs now on steroids.
Yeah.
Babe Ruth did it on Budweiser and syphilis.
With dead balls. With dead balls. I just wanted to say that somehow.
And you did. Twice. Yeah, there we go. He's flushing.
I'm fired again.
Yeah.
There we go.
What's the deal with showing all those Nolan Ryan clips without any clips of him as an angel?
That's what, and he was an angel when he pitched his first 2.
Yeah. So there we go. My fast fact is 1,500, which is the number of shows that Maury Povich has done on daytime television. He was greeted with a surprise for his 1,500th anniversary episode. We have the video.
Oh, goody.
2, 3. Congratulations, Maury!
Wow.
It's actually 2,500. I got it off by 1,000.
Wow, coming out of a cake. Finally, the epitome of every journalist's dream, jumping out of a cake on reality television. Someday we could be doing that, too.
You could be the next Connie Chung.
I want to have the career arc where I at least get up high enough here that I can have that down there.
Yeah, well, there you go. Thank you, Johnny. That
He
was
is
very
not the father,
exciting.
too. Paternity test came in.
Good.
Okay.
Maury's not the dad.
Of who?
It's the Maury thing.
Oh, it's a Maury
It's
thing?
a Maury thing.
I think when you just say that in general, you're in trouble. That's the way you answer. It's like, hi, no, I'm not the dad.
Hi, not me.
Not me.
Well, that's going to do it for today. Let us know your thoughts on today's show. Should the feds lower the blood alcohol level allowed for drivers to 0.05? Is there anything more frightening than Connie Chung jumping out of a cake?
Stephen Kruiser? No, that's all right.
I'm still traumatized.
Yeah, I know. There we go.
Connie is the father, by the way.
Yeah. Connie's the father.
Well, let us know what you think in the comments section below, or you can always go to our Facebook page at facebook.com/NextGenTV. You can comment right there. On behalf of Stephen, Alan, and Tammy, I'm John Phillips. Thanks for watching.
Andrew, you are not the father.